Well, good morning, everyone. Good that you guys are here. If you're joining us online, welcome. My name is Nick Hanselman. I'm part of a band called The New Haven, and I'm going to play a couple songs for you. Now that it's springtime, I'm not fine. Let the rain come washing over. Into this summer, I remember the years of watching flowers. Back when I thought I belonged, those years are gone. It's the season, the ones that'll hurt. It's the season, the ones that'll fall apart. Through the fire and pain we wait for the joy you made. Oh, autumn, we never let down. Look at all the colors. See the snowflakes fall my face. Stop and feel the wonder. Savor the promise of love. Now winter has come. It's the season, the ones that'll hurt. It's the season, the ones that'll fall apart. Through the fire and pain we wait, the joy you made. Through the fire and pain we wait, the joy you made. It's the seasons, the ones that'll hurt. It's the seasons, the ones that'll fall apart. It's the seasons, the ones that'll hurt. It's the seasons, the ones that'll fall apart. Through the fire and pain we wait for the joy you made. Through the fire and pain we wait for the joy you made. Thank you. You call me off the boat and onto the waves. They tied you up and I turned away as they made you bleed. You ask, do I love you any more than this? You know the depths of my heart. That's just who you are. taught me how to see, and taught me how to speak. But I still spit in your face, but you still chase me. You ask, do I love you any more than this? You know the depths of my heart. That's just who you are. You ask, do I love you any more than this? You know the depths of my heart. That's just who you are. And you ask, do I love you any more than this? You know the depths of my heart. That's just who you are. Thank you very much. So I'm going to awkwardly tune my guitar, but as I do that, I'm going to talk as one does as they tune their guitar. My name's Nick Hanselman from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. This is my, I want to say third, fourth, fifth time. I'm losing track, but that's good because it's always a great time here. This next song is called Stand Your Love, and it just means so much to me lately, just because I've been going through a lot of changes in my life. I shouldn't even say some, all of them are really good. I left my job at a church, just felt like it was time to go, but God opened the door for another job to get me back to where I want to be in life, and I just got engaged, so that's been awesome. My beautiful fiance is right back there, so that's been awesome. So it's been a great couple days so far, but as all this change has been going on, as I was leaving my work and as I was going to propose, like I just heard the song in my head of Stand Your Love, that doesn't matter, that fear, anxiety, nothing can stand in a way as long as we have our eyes on Christ. Amen? Amen. So this is Stand Your Love. When darkness tries to roll over my bones, when sorrow comes to steal the joy I own, when brokenness and pain is all I know, oh, I won't be shaken, oh, I won't be shaken. My fear does each stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear does each stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear does each stand a chance when I stand in your love. Well, shame no longer has a place to hide. And I am not a captive to the lies. I'm not afraid to leave my past behind. Oh, I won't be shaken. No, I won't be shaken. My fear does each stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear does each stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear does each stand a chance when I stand in your love? There's power that can break off every chain. There's power that can empty out a grave. There's resurrection power that can save. There's power in your name. There's power in your name. There's power now. There's power that can break off every chain. There's power that can empty out a grave. There's resurrection power that can save. There's power in your name. Power in your name. My fear does each stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear does each stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear does each stand a chance when I stand in your love. Oh, my fear does each stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear does each stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear does each stand a chance when I stand in your love. This is how I fight my battles. Yeah, this is how I fight my battles. Oh, this is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. It may look like I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded by you. 'Cause this is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how this is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how Amen. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Nick, and congratulations again. That's awesome on your engagement. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, everybody online. Glad you're here. A couple announcements. We're starting a new series today. We call it Week 0 because Dawn's going to set it up. It's called Entry Level, No Experience Required. Boy, I encourage you, if you can be here, be involved with this. Because the last week we are going to be doing baptism, so you definitely want to be part of that. That is such an awesome thing. Couple things, T-shirts. If you want some cool Action Church gear, Online, there's an app. You want to put your size, your name, and phone number, I believe it is, and your size to get yourself a T-shirt. The second Tuesday of every month is Dudes Day. I encourage all the fellas to come out. A little bit of fellowship, some food. And it's just good to be around guys. We just don't do it as good as the gals. And speaking of the gals, they got Ladies' Night coming up 9/13. That is on a Sunday. And we got Youth Night on 9/20. So every the teenagers involved, bring some friends. You know, it's really a good time. And with that said, we always encourage you to invite, invest, and get involved. Invite is so easy, especially, you know, bring a friend, bring a coworker. Online, man, I heard there's like watch parties. I'm not sure how that works, but that sounds pretty cool. Invest, we have boxes out there. You can do it online, and there's an app you can invest your money there, invest your time. Then that goes along with getting involved. There's always things to do. There's yard work, there's the kids area, there's cleanup, setup, and all that kind of stuff. So we definitely encourage you always get involved. And with that said, Pastor Dunn.
Well, that was awesome, and congratulations on the engagement and a new job. Just kick everything off new. I was thinking this week, about job interviews, and I realized, like, I don't think I've been on a real job interview for 27 years, which is good because I'm really, really bad at them. 3 words that describe me, I think, you know, thinking back on job interviews. Now, I have done church jobs in the meantime, but those aren't really job interviews, because here's the thing about getting a church job is you have to wear khakis, number one. And number two, you kind of go before a board, and church jobs are different because they can always say God told them not to hire you. So it's very different, but I haven't been on a real job interview since, I think, 93. And the 3 words that describe me, I was thinking, were sort of stammery, sweaty, and gassy. You know, like that's me at a job interview. And I was thinking about that last job interview because I've been self-employed now since, I guess, 95 or 96. That last job interview was interesting because out here from St. Louis, Missouri, St. Charles, Missouri, and landed in Baltimore, Maryland, and I was, you know, sort of crashing on a friend's couch, and they had invited Michelle and I to move out here and help them in a church. And of course, there was no money involved in that transaction. So they're like, no problem. There's a lot of people in the church, and they'll give you a job, and we got stuff lined up. Well, I don't remember how it happened. Maybe they saw me because I had hair like down. It was longer than Mike Hannigan's. I'll just say that. You know, it's like I had hair down to my waist and sort of a scruffy beard, and maybe that's how it fell through. It was probably me. But I know, like, I'm a couple days in, and I don't have any job and really no prospects, and knowing that we would need work, you know, to move out here. And I found a place, and it turned out to be way more expensive than St. Louis. And so I did this weird thing that you used to do back then. I was actually looking in the paper and found this ad for this renovation carpenter at an apartment complex. And I wasn't a carpenter, and I'd never worked in an apartment complex. And I thought, well, I can probably do that. And so I remember going to that job interview. And it really was a pretty terrible interview because, you know, what they were looking for was not me. I had worked in new construction. I was the punch-out mechanic, and so I'd never worked as a carpenter and didn't even have all the tools. And what they were offering was less than the minimum that I knew that I needed to survive out here if I was going to get that new apartment, you know. And so it seemed like all of sort of the wrong pieces, you know, like nothing seemed right about it. We did come to an agreement, like, okay, we can't pay you the money you're looking for, but you could work a whole lot of hours and make it up. And so I went, okay, that sounds good. So in the end, I took the job. And it's funny looking back, like, it seemed like a terrible fit. I'd never worked in that industry. It really wasn't the job that I did. But that one job sort of set up our lives, Michelle and I's life, for today. like working in the rental industry. I still work in that industry. It was in that industry, like I started work as a carpenter. I actually moved into a project manager over the years. And that's how I started my own company, because they still never paid me a lot, even as a project manager. And I used to work on the side on Saturdays. And eventually my side projects made more than my weekly pay. And so I was like, why don't I just do that all the time? And that's how I became self-employed. And it was there first when I was working as a project manager that I realized that painters, I'm a painting contractor now, so I can talk bad about them, are really terrible, terrible people. And so I was like, well, I could do that, So all of the things sort of that have led up to today, of being self-employed today. And even I was thinking about, like during the COVID shutdown, the fact that I paint in the rental industry primarily allowed us to work all through that time instead of being shut down with construction. And so I look back and I go, one job interview, like one interview, at least in my life, changed everything. That was 27 years ago. And it sort of set our life on a trajectory out here on the East Coast and, away from my home in Missouri, and set up, the thing I would be doing for the next 27 years from that one interview. Now, I do want to tell you, and we're going to say this, and I want to remind you of this during this series, that we're going to use the metaphor of a career or a job interview. But being a Christian, it's not the same as a career. But I want to challenge you to think about this. I think Christianity is closer to a career than it is a religion. Because I don't think we can find in Scripture when Jesus comes along and he sort of talks to some, commercial fisherman type, think deadliest catch. And he doesn't say, hey, I'd like you to have a little service for me later. Or, hey, I hope you guys can gather and talk about me later. Or, hey, I hope you can hold hands and have some sort of experience later. No, what did he say to these, commercial fishermen? He's just like, follow me. Come along with me and do the things I do and live the lives I live and walk with me. Sort of the first job interview, sort of the way I do job interviews today. When I hire someone through the years, I've totally given up on reading resumes or taking applications. I just go, hey, come work with me a day. And it's weird. It works every time. And if they're good, they stay another day. And usually it only lasts a day or two before I find out. But it's like, and I think that's what Jesus was doing. Jesus was literally saying, come along, walk along, let's see what happens. Shadow me for the day. And now that was for the disciples, and that was a long time ago. And that was when Jesus walked the earth. But here's the thing. The words that Jesus gave to us are these. And I want to ask you, does this resonate like with your soul like it does with mine in 2020, after the year we've had, after the world we live in, like after the society that we're creating? It says, then Jesus said, come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Now, if you stop there, you would think, oh, well, that does mean like we can just hang out. We can just sort of sing Kumbaya and, like hold hands and we'll have a service. But that's not what he said at all. He said, I will give you rest, but take my yoke upon you. Now, there's two ways to look at yoke and there's the farm version that I often think of, which is cattle, or oxen or horses. They would actually put that, and that's what they used, a yoke on their neck to pull a wagon or a plow or some farm implement. And that could have been what he's talking about. And he used that word, actually. Other people have said during the year, no, he was talking about the yoke that a master teacher would put on to his apprentice. Maybe so, same thing. He's saying, take my yoke upon you, take my teaching, take my lifestyle, take my operating system, take my career path upon you. And let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light. And notice he didn't say, come and I'll take all your burdens. Come, you'll never have to work again. Come and just relax. But he says, and this just speaks to me. If it doesn't speak to you, I want you to at least think about it. It's not that we expect that we won't have to carry any burdens in life. It's not that we expect like a life of leisure. Not expect we're never going to have to deal with trouble. But man, couldn't you use a lightening of your load at least? Like, I like that. For my yoke is easy to bear. Interesting thing about yoke, too, is generally it's for 2 or more animals. So the picture that Jesus is sort of painting, I think, to these, agricultural people is, hey, I'm going to walk along beside you, and I'm going to help you pull the load or carry the load that you carry. And so in 5 minutes, I've sort of laid out a plan for you what it means to follow Christ, to literally follow him, to come along to shadow him, and that Jesus said, hey, take my yoke upon you. My burden is light. It's so much easier than the way you're living. But my question is, how did it get so complicated then? Because many of you, if you think about following Christ, if you think about what it means to be a Christian, that's not what came into your mind at all. It was probably a religious experience or a list of rules or a way of living or, sort of a college course of things you need to know. And just like starting a new career, like becoming a carpenter, one way to become a carpenter is to actually learn it and follow someone. My way of becoming a carpenter was telling them I was a carpenter and then having to figure it out. I remember actually buying the tools and trying to scuff them up on my way to the first day. I don't really want them to know all my, and trust me, most of them were used or donated, but it was I don't really want all new tools in my tool belt, so I better get some mud on these things. But here's the thing, we've made it really, really, really complicated. And Jesus said 2 words to his first followers, just follow me. Just come along with me. Just shadow me. Let's see what happens. And so over the next 4 weeks, I like how we're actually doing 5 weeks, and Mitch has got around that by calling this week 0. Maybe it's because he's gone, or maybe he doesn't expect much of this. I don't know, but he called it week 0, and that makes me laugh. But in the coming weeks, that's really what I'm going to try to do. I'm really going to at least pitch to you. I have worked other jobs besides in the construction field. I did try sales, and I'm lousy at sales. I'm Tommy boy bad at sales. So I'm not going to try to sell you because it wouldn't work anyway. But I do want to pitch to you this idea of becoming a Christian, of committing your life to Christ, of coming along and taking his yoke and walking with him. And maybe if it's your first, experience with that, maybe at the end of these 4 coming weeks, at the end of September, maybe you'll get baptized. Maybe we'll dunk you in a horse trough right here on this stage. Maybe it's going to be recommitting, but here's the thing. I think it's time to do either. And not just because I look around this world's crazy, or I don't know what's coming. That's always been the case, although these are interesting times. But man, it just speaks to me don't you want what Jesus was talking about when he said, take my yoke upon you. My burden is easy to bear. It's a better way of living. So that's what we're going to do in the future. But before we do that, I thought where we should start, and this would really be helpful. I try to do this when I talk to people about, my job, and I want to do this about the church, is to sort of explain how things work, right? If you're on a job interview, it would be very helpful to sort of go, okay, this is the way the company and this is not coming from me. This is because I'm not the founder, but a word from our founder is just sort of I want to give you sort of an idea from Jesus how this whole Christian church thing works. And over the weeks, we're actually going to talk about sort of, some of you interchange those 2 words, Christian church, if you go to a church, you're a Christian. And if it's there's sort of 2 things, but there's an outgrowth of being a Christian that leads to church. That's the gathering of Christians together. But before we do any of that, I just wanted to take just a few minutes today and sort of on this last week of August and before we really kick off this series. And I want to share something, and it's funny because I've had this conversation with numerous people over the last, I think, few months. And so I thought I'd just share it with all of you, whether you're here or out there streaming. And it's this idea of how our organization works. How Jesus said our organization work. And it starts out in the most awkward way possible, which I like. Mark remembered it this way. It says, then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came over and spoke to Jesus. Teacher, they said, we want you to do us a favor. What is your request? He asked. And they replied, when you sit on your glorious throne, we want to sit in places of honor next to you, one on your right side and the other on the left. So they're like basically like, hey, Jesus, we believe now, and it's funny because when he said kingdom, he would say the kingdom is near, or the kingdom is among you. Like, they were like, oh, that's a literal kingdom. I can't wait till we kick Herod out of the palace, and then Jesus is going to sit on the throne. And they're like, oh, by the way, I'm just saying, we're pretty good at this. We're called the Sons of Thunder anyway. That's our wrestling name. So why don't we, if you're hiring, like, we'd like to be in the management position. We'd like to be on the right and left, and just sort of like you would see today, in some sort of ceremonial way, like, I don't know, State of the Union or something. It matters who's sitting on the stage. So they're like, if you're on your glorious throne, we'd like to sit next to you. This wasn't just like a seating chart argument. This is like a position thing. And so what they're really talking about is hierarchy, which I realized this week, if we can go back to the word hierarchy, that I can't spell hierarchy. Like, we try to get, can we get me back there, Kate? Thank you. I tried to spell that numerous times this week, and it just didn't turn out well. There we go. I don't know. Spell check disagrees with the way I spell it. And that's what they were talking about. They were talking about sort of how we decide who's in charge. The way I like to talk about hierarchy is fat cats and skinny cats, because that is something we've experienced over the years. All of our cats are fat, so I should say fat cats and fatter cats. But we've noticed over the years, having multiple cats at the house, that there's always a fat cat and a skinny cat. And in fact, we used to have 4 brothers and sisters that we all rescued at the same time, and there was like fat cat and 3 skinny cats. And then the fat cat would die, and then another one would move up to be the fat cat. And you're like, wait a minute. And then you realize, like, oh, this is not like a eating problem. This is a hierarchy thing. Like, the fat cat decides when everybody else eats, and it doesn't matter. And then, like, another one would die, and then there's a new fat cat. And you're like, how is that? But here's the thing. That's the way it works. There's always a hierarchy. There's a hierarchy in everything. You've heard the term pecking order. If you grew up on a farm, that's a real thing among chickens. Like, there's a chicken that gets, if they peck someone, then they peck the next one, and they peck the next one, and then the poor last one just gets pecked by everyone. Nobody respects the last chicken. But here's the thing. Like, that's a fact of life. There's a hierarchy. There's always, hierarchy. It's a definition. It's a system or organization in which people or groups are ranked above one another according to status or authority. I don't know a system that isn't like that. Because in every system, eventually, there are fat cats and skinny cats. In every system, there are, even when they go, we're all equal, but some of us are a little more equal than others. And here's the thing about this story about James and John asking to basically be put in charge, to go, hey, I know you've picked 12 of us, because at this time they've picked 12, but we think we should be a little more apostle-y than the others, basically. Here's the funny thing. Mark wrote it like that. Matthew gave this detail, which makes it worse. It says, then the mother of James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to Jesus with her sons and knelt respectfully. I don't know why Mark doesn't mention that, or maybe these are 2 different things. I don't care. Like, this is worse. Like, mommy came and said, hey, Jesus, can you make my boys managers? Like, can the boys move up in the organization somehow? But here's the deal. Whether we're talking about apostles or fat cats and skinny cats, or your job or my job, how an organization deals with hierarchy really ends up defining the organization, right? I mean, you know this from work, right? Like, if there's an organization based on, let's say, education, so maybe a collegiate system or something where, the higher the education or the more papers published, that affects how the organization is. The goal of the organization becomes to, increase your education, or increase the papers that you have published, or in some way the hierarchy is defined by whatever it is. Now, maybe it's violence, That's the prison hierarchy, right? Like the most violent person, the strongest person, or at least the person willing to exert the most force, let's not get into the details, is the fat cat at that point. And there's a million different hierarchies, but there's always a hierarchy. Maybe it's performance, like in sales or something where, hey, top salesman, that's the most important person. And that's the person we create, we cater to that person. Or maybe it's family ties. If you've ever worked in a family business, maybe it's like, hey, if you're not related, I don't know, you might be great, but you're never going to rise to the level of someone that's related. Or, there's just physical dominance, or there's, sometimes it's longevity. Just, I've been here longer. And in that system, the idea is just to do whatever it takes to be there the longest, and then you're in charge. But there's always a hierarchy. Maybe it's just corruption, like paying off someone, like their whole countries run on that. But there's always a hierarchy. There's always someone in charge. There's always someone who's the boss or the man or the woman. And it doesn't really matter what system it is. It's human nature. And it's just nature. It's fat cats and skinny cats. And it's boss man and non-boss man. And it's like just the way hierarchy happens. And it really, really matters. Because how you sort of define who's in charge, how that hierarchy works, always affects the system. Like even if it's, sometimes we go, but we're modern, we're so much nicer now. So let's make the most important people be, it's very victims. Victims are the top of the hierarchy now. In many places in America. Well, what happens in that? Why do we have fake victim stories? Like this guy says he was victimized and he really wasn't, or she said she was kidnapped and she wasn't. Why is that? Because they want to get atop of the hierarchy, even if it's just being the biggest victim, because that's the way it works. It's fat cats and skinny cats. And Jesus responded and he said this. So this is so important because Jesus is going, hey, okay, this has come up now. This has come up, like hierarchy has raised its head. Like I just came out and said, follow me. And I've got commercial fishermen, and I've got Matthew, he's a tax collector, and I've got Simon, he's a zealot. Simon's a militia member, and Matthew works for the Romans. Like these two guys would hate each other. They'd kill each other, but no, they all work on my team. But now James and John have said, yeah, boss, but we think we should move up the chain a little bit. So Jesus said to them, you don't know what you're asking. Are you able to drink from the bitter cup of suffering I am about to drink? Now, this would have been weird to them, even though Jesus told them again and again and again that he was going to be crucified. He didn't say crucified, but he said he was going to be killed and betrayed. He told them all the time. They never listened. They were like me. You can tell me I'm not going to listen. They were imagining still glorious throne. He was going to take over Herod's throne. But he's like, are you able to drink from the bitter cup of suffering I'm about to drink? Are you able to be baptized with the baptism of suffering I must be baptized with? Oh, yes, they replied, we are able. These are can-do guys, so I like that about them. It says, then Jesus told them, you will indeed drink from my bitter cup and be baptized with my baptism of suffering, which, flash forward, was true. They were actually both martyred. They were both killed. But I have no right to say who will sit on my right or left. Now, that's weird. God has prepared those places for the ones he has chosen. Then the 10 other disciples heard what James and John had said, and they were indignant. I bet they were. I mean, can you imagine? Like, they're like, I thought we were in this together, and now you guys. And seriously, Mark said your mom was here. Like that. I mean, like, I can't even imagine like how this had to be ugly. Like, your mom asked Jesus? Like, how old are you? But that's what happened. But I want you to notice that Jesus said, like, there is a hierarchy. He didn't say, oh, no, we are all equal. There are no hierarchy. There's nothing like that. We're all the same. He didn't say that. He said there is a hierarchy, and Jesus said, the Son of God, Jesus, God in a bod, said, not my call. Isn't that interesting? Like, very few things did Jesus say were not his call. He said, that when the end came, when he returned to this earth, I hear the clippity-clop some week, but it could be thousands of years. People have thought that forever. But when he returned, he said, that's not up to me. God the Father decides that. And he also said, I'm not in charge of who rises to the top of this hierarchy. So here's the question I have for you, and it's a pretty important question. If there is a hierarchy, and God chooses, like, who's in charge and who's the boss and who's the boss, different story. How does he choose? Like, that would be important. Like, that's important in every organization. Like, you should know that at your job. Like, how do you advance, right? That's a good question and a very important question. And it'll actually, like if it's, violence, you might not want to work there. Or if it's family ties, well, unless you're a family member, you go, I'm never going to advance. Maybe I don't want to be in this industry. Or maybe it's just seniority. You're like, I don't know if I want to stay here for 52 years to be head of, paving. But it's an important question. Or maybe it's education. Well, I don't have enough education. Or how would God choose? And this is what is so interesting. Like how the king, he said, I'm not in charge, God's in charge, but God does choose. And then he said something that I think is probably the craziest thing because it's so different than anything else that we can think of as humans. Jesus said this. So Jesus calls the guys together. And it's an awkward meeting. Like, can you imagine, like, calls the guys together, they're pissed. Like, James and John's mom, like, they're asking you to be in charge of us, because that's really what they're saying. Like, we want to be in charge of the other 10. So Jesus called them together, and he said, you know that the rulers in this world lord it over their people, and officials flaunt their authority over those under them. But among you, it will be different. Whoever wants to be a leader among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first among you must be the slave of everyone else. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others and give his life as ransom for many. Isn't it interesting that that hasn't changed a bit? Like they were talking about Romans and Roman soldiers and, the Sanhedrin and Pharisees and King Herod and the Caesar, But this is still true, right? This is still true that rulers, whether they're like assistant to the regional manager or vice president or city council member or mayor or homeowners association, HOA chairman, like they flaunt it. The rulers have different rules. And that hasn't changed, has it? Because humans are humans. And in the end, it's so funny, like whether it's the governor or the president or the president of your company, there's some line that they say, well, that applies to you, but not to me. Rulers have different rules, and we see it. Now, here's the thing about it you and I think, like, well, I don't know, Don. We're different. We don't have a Caesar, we don't have a king, and we do have a president, but we elect them every 4 years. We have elected officials. Like, we vote for the people who rule over us. So I don't know if this applies. Well, okay, but I think Jesus covered even that. And this is interesting because this is a talk he had at the Last Supper. Like when he's meeting with his, team before dying, he has this talk again. He says, Jesus told them, in this world, the kings and great men lord it over their people. And then he says this, which I think applies to today. Yet they are called the friends of the people, right? Like they're public servants who get really, really, really rich. Public serving. Isn't it interesting? Like Jesus even knew, like, oh, there will be someday, because this must have seemed weird to them because they're like, I don't know about Caesar's not my friend. But we live in a system where we go, no. We elect a president or we elect our congressman and they're our friend. Not really our friend, but here's what we think. And this is why we elect people. We elect people to basically protect and reward our friends and I, like the people we like, and punish the bad people. The only difference is we have different ideas of who should be protected and rewarded, and the people should be punished. Like we could go around the room and we would probably end up in some sort of fist fight because some of us would not agree at all, but we would all agree on this one thing. Even though we say, hey, we just elect people to represent us, that's not really what we want. What we really want is someone to help us and protect us, protect our industry, protect our lifestyle, protect our family, protect our friends, and punish those miscreants over there, the people. But Jesus said, that's the system for everything. And it's funny that even though the world has changed and technology has changed and everything, like they had never seen a microscope and they didn't know about outer space and they'd certainly never seen a satellite image of this blue marble we called Earth, but their systems were just the same because those are human systems. And Jesus said, but among you, it will be different. Now, that's a tough call. It really is. Like, how are you going to make that different, Jesus? How are you going to make that different when it always sort of ends up the same way? It always sort of ends up the same way because no matter who you put on top, it's still a hierarchy. You might go, oh, okay, like, I believe children are the future. Like, we need to, let adults serve children. They're the most vulnerable. They're the weakest. They're the people that need it most. Put children in charge. It won't be long till there's like some 62-year-old guy claiming to be a baby because that's what we do. Actually, there is a 62-year-old guy claiming to be a baby right now because it's a hierarchy. And we still put someone above the others, whether it's victims or, people with the highest performance or the highest sales or the most educated or the strongest or the most violent or the people with, I don't know, the most piercings at the tattoo shop. It doesn't matter. In human hierarchies, there's always someone up here and they lord it over everyone else. And you might go, oh, well, they don't have to. They can be nice. Oh, yeah, they can. And there are some really good leaders who don't do that overtly, but in the end, there's something, whether it's their parking spot or their salary or the rules of engagement for their lives, they have different rules than you and I because they're at the top and we're not. But what Jesus said that was so weird is he said, if you want to be in charge, you have to move to the bottom. He flipped, and I drew that pyramid. I want you to know, like Kate actually preserved that because I drew that, and it's artistic. And if you see the line across there, that's because crap flows to the bottom. That's really what Jesus said. Jesus said, you know what, we're going to flip the pyramid over. The leader is at the bottom. Like the more you want to be in charge, and I realize this, like I say I always don't want to be in charge, but pretty much everything I'm at, I end up the boss. Not because I don't even know why, just in me, like I do that. But thankfully in the church, it's like if you want to be the boss, what Jesus said is you outserve. And so that's why when I look around church, man, we have such a good team now. And I'm so excited about the team. And if you wonder, like, you go, oh, well, why does Mitch stand up there? Or why does Bill get to decide things? Well, I'll tell you why. Because Bill and Denise have served and sacrificed for years. I think the second week of Action Church, like 12 years ago, Bill calls me up. And I love, you know why Bill is, the man around here? Because you know what Bill asked me? What do you need? In fact, he goes, can I set up chairs? Can I help clean up? That's what Bill and Denise did their first week. Bill came and did that. And that's how you get a leadership position in the kingdom. It's like so amazing to kind of like see how Jesus took this whole script and just flipped it over. He's like, there will always be people who sort of have it in them to be in charge, that want to be the boss. Okay. But the way you get to be the boss in the kingdom, in the church, and in Jesus' world, think about it. Like the reason why Jesus is the center of Christianity is because no one sacrificed more or served more. And you might go, well, there's been a lot of people martyred over the years. Yes, they have. But Jesus came from heaven. Like those guys that were martyred, those guys even, and not to take anything away, my goodness, I can't imagine giving my life for the faith. But the truth is they didn't really have a choice. In the end, you know, they had a choice in what they said and what they did. And over the years, thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands, maybe more people have lost their life for the faith. But in the end, they were sort of tied up or restrained or killed against their will. There's nothing they could do because they weren't powerful enough. But Jesus had the power to like level the city and walk away, and he chose not to. And so we worship him. He's the leader because he's at the bottom. And that's really important to know about Christianity if you want to be a part of it. Is that God chose, now this is so interesting because God could have chose to elevate anyone. God could have said the people who sing the loudest, they are in charge. Or the people who worship me most, the people who know the most Bible verses, the nicest people, they are the, that's not what he said. He set his hierarchy up in a way that it didn't serve him, it served people. So it's so interesting. I think that's why Jesus said, come to me, all you who are weary, and doesn't this sound good? And carry heavy burdens, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and let me teach you, because I am humble and I am gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light. See, Jesus is saying, like, I'm doing the hard stuff. And that's what I want to sort of invite you to do. If you want to be a follower of Christ, the idea is to work your way to the bottom of the organization. To actually, like, it's funny, like thinking about like the people that, if we had someone in charge around here or in charge, they're the people that sort of get less out of the service than anyone else. I think like Mitch and Mike, you know, like the more they do around here to not really get to enjoy being part of the church in the way everyone else does, they're like working, their Sundays are work days, sort of the higher their status rises, because the more they're sacrificing, the more we go, hey, we need to listen to you. And like last week, we're going to show a video of the picnic. The picnic was so great. It was so good to see people who haven't been coming in the building that were out there. But that whole thing happened, like Jill and a few others and Michelle, like made that whole event happen and work behind the scenes so that we, and I count myself in that, I literally just showed up. I didn't do anything for that. And it was so refreshing. It was like, awesome, man. I just showed up and wandered around and ate meat. Like I was just in a coma later. Like I was in a meat coma till like 5:30. I was asleep. It was awful, but it was wonderful. But that happened just because others served us so that we could have a great event. And that's the way church works. And that's the way Jesus and God set up the hierarchy. There will be a hierarchy. Somebody is in charge. But the person in charge actually is just the person who serves and sacrifices the most. So if you think about it, like the person who desires to be in charge, like you're an idiot like me and always go, oh, I'm going to be the boss. Okay. But you got to make it better for everybody around you. In fact, you got to make it the most betterer. That's not good English, but that's the way it works. And so that's what I want to invite you into, because that's what Jesus said. Like, think about it. Like, these guys were commercial fishermen, and they were living their lives. And it wasn't an easy life. Being a fisherman's hard. And in a way, Jesus elevated them. Like we're talking about Peter, James, and John. I mean, they're legends. There are buildings today, 2,000 years later, named after them. And it wasn't because they were really good fishermen, because we have no fishermen buildings. So they were elevated so high. But how were they elevated? By going to the bottom, by giving their lives, by actually physically dying for the faith. And so that's what I want to do. I want to invite you. We're going to do something different. I want you to come back up. If you play some more music for great music today. But I want to invite you to a meeting next week if you're interested in sort of pursuing that. Even if you're not interested in going, hey, I don't know that I'm a leader. But we're going to do something a little bit different around here. Over the past few months, we've sort of gathered more and more people into a meeting on the first Sunday. We've been trying to do that where we share sort of like how the sausage is made at Action Church, and we get, your input and your work, like, hey, we're doing this, and trying to connect more people that are part of Action Church to the mission of Action Church, where it's not just like, I don't want anyone going, I wonder what they're doing to make the church better. I want it to be all of us going, here's what we're part of in our church, making it not just better, but more acceptable to Jesus. And so there's no good thing to call it. I've sort of called it shareholders meeting. That doesn't mean you own stock at Action Church. It would be penny stock. You would probably want to short it. But here's the thing, like, if you are a shareholder, if you're someone who's involved in, the mission of Action Church, whether you're giving or you're attending, or you just go, I want to know more about how it works. Well, we're an open book, and so you could stay after the service next week and be part of that. And if you're a team leader or you're doing something actively in the church, we definitely ask you to do that, because that's how we can connect. But I wanted to just sort of start this out. And next week we'll go on and we'll talk about like what it actually means to be a follower of Christ in a little different way. But you know how strange it is to think that Jesus, this carpenter's son, he was probably a real carpenter, not like me who just said I was a carpenter, invented something so different and so simple. Like, because every organization, I don't care if they're socialists or capitalists or communists or it doesn't matter. They go, we have a different way. We're all the same, but the pyramid looks the same. The only thing that changes about the pyramid is who's at the top. And Jesus flipped the pyramid over and goes, no, guys. If you want to be a leader, you be a slave. If you want to be the top, you better go to the bottom. And that changes everything about our organization. And I just wanted you to know that if you're going to consider being part of it. Let's pray. Dear Jesus, thank you for your sacrifice. And God, we know that just sort of unthinkable what you did for us. God, I pray for everyone who's here this morning, and I pray for everyone out there who's going to be following along now or later this week. And God, I pray that from that group, you would call people to be your followers. And God, I pray that this month we would see people move across the line from being sort of Jesus fans to Jesus followers, and from sort of church goers to church people, part of a church. And God, we'll trust you. But God, I pray that you would help us to do this correctly, to do it in the way you laid out, to go to the bottom instead of the top. In your name we pray. Amen.
Lord, I trust you with all my heart. Lord, I don't need to understand. In all my ways, Lord, I will know you, and you will guide me through. For you will be my source of confidence. You will be my source of nourishment by the ways of your truth. You are giving life. For my God, you are Father to me. Let love and faithfulness never leave me. Let your wisdom always guide me. For I will not fear this life, for you are with me all the time. 'Cause you will be my source of confidence. You will be my source of nourishment by the ways of your truth. You are giving life. My God, you are Father. So Lord, let me know that the sea that you put in front of me will part, and you'll be there. Lord, let me know that the sea that you put in front of me will part, and you'll be there.
Wow, thank you so much. Hey, I want to invite you next week to join us for breakfast. Weather looks good. We're going to do it out in the parking lot again. We're going to cook outside. It was so much fun, a few months ago, and we're going to gather back in and kick off the series doing that. So 9 o'clock to serve and 10 o'clock to eat, and we'll serve all during the thing. And then there's a video we're going to end out with. Check it out from last week's picnic. And once again, thank you all of you who did that. That was just so nice to be able to just show up, and what a great event. Thank you.
The summer's calling. If the kingdom's overthrown, meet me at the cornerstone. I know that I can't be without you. This bond is solid gold. We're a diamond and an emerald. It took me forever to find you. 'Cause when it's all over, the love that you give will be there to guide you in every way. Now we've been through the cold and darkest days. The summer's calling. as we wait for the smoke to clear and we watch our dreams appear. I know that we can rise together. This vision that we share is ours. Together we can touch the stars. I know that we will see December. 'Cause when it's all over, the love that you give will be there to guide you.